So today in this video, we're going to take on a big question we talk about on this channel all the time in a different way. And this is a question and a topic I'm asked about all the time, okay? Here it is. Talk about forgiveness. We're going to talk about this different. I'm asked about forgiveness every single time I'm in a group. It comes up over and over again, even when I'm doing therapy sessions. These are the kinds of things I hear. Dr. Ramani, can I heal if I don't forgive? Will forgiveness finally set me free? If I forgive, will then I automatically heal? How can I move on if I don't forgive them? People will tell me I'm being told I'm a bad person for not forgiving. Or will say, I don't really forgive them, but I feel pressured to forgive them. On and on and on I hear these things. And the answer from me to these folks tends to be the same. You absolutely can heal if you don't forgive. And then I ask them, you want to forgive? Do you really forgive them? And then tell me how will you feel when the narcissistic person turns around and does the same thing to you again? Because they most likely will. So it makes forgiveness a very fraught topic. But let's turn this question around. I think this is an important one for us to visit and revisit, which is, does the narcissistic person ever forgive? Right? They're asking for it. Do they offer it? The answer to that is probably not. So while you are sitting there anguishing about whether or not you should forgive the narcissistic person, I can tell you this right now, they are not doing the same for you. Because, yes, let's be honest and be open. Sometimes we do wrong by the narcissistic person. We may say something, we may do something, we may violate their trust. Obviously, none of us are perfect, and when we're in relationships with narcissistic people, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. It's the nature of being human. However, when a person is not narcissistic or not antagonistic, there's a big difference. Healthier people are capable of doing things like making genuine amends, taking responsibility and apologizing, being accountable, and even changing behavior, which is the crucial piece, especially when there's two healthy people in a relationship. So you may do something that's not okay in a relationship. You own it. You apologize. You take responsibility. You try to make it right. You change your behavior. And keep in mind that in most cases, a narcissistic person is not going to do any of these things. And folks, depends on the person, but not everything feels forgivable. So in life, we may sometimes do things that someone can't forgive, and it hurts us. But hopefully we learn from it and don't do it with someone else and grieve the relationship we lost. Now, we are humans, and to pretend otherwise, that we could ever be perfect, that's the ultimate arrogance. Forgiveness is a complex human conversation that we try to simplify by treating it as a one-size-fits-all. But what if we actually do wrong by the narcissistic person? Does the narcissistic person forgive us? Right? And they don't. So you may wonder, well, if they don't forgive us, what do they do? And some of you watching this will say, well, the narcissistic person said that they forgave me. So let's break that down. Number one, in many cases, the narcissistic person will not forgive you for whatever the thing it was you did. It could be days, weeks, years, decades, and even lifetimes of them repeatedly saying to you, how could you? How could you do this to me? And it will seem as though they believe that they were the only person ever wronged in the history of people. It wasn't just that something bad was done. It was that you, little old you, did something to the great and wonderful them. And then you may also hear lots of victimized superiority stuff. After all I did for you, or everyone takes advantage of me, you get the drill, I'm sure you've been there. And they won't forgive you. And they will likely hold whatever the mistake, transgression, whatever you did, they'll hold it against you maybe for an entire lifetime. And number two, and even if they pretend to forgive you and say they forgive you, the narcissistic person will actually hold a grudge forever. You might think they forgive you, but then they'll keep bringing the thing up. 5 years later, 20 years later, hell, 50 years later. You can really see this stuff go down in families. There's intergenerational grudges, right? You see it, again, across generations. Narcissistic parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles all holding grudges for lifetimes, holding grudges for people that are long since dead, and people not speaking to each other and just being cut out of the family photographs. Just word to the wise, okay? Grudges do imply non-forgiveness. So even if a person says they've forgiven you and they're holding a grudge, they haven't forgiven you. I say this, I'm a bit of a grudge holder, so I'm owning that. Number 3, but narcissistic people do care how they look to others. So they will virtue signal and pretend they have forgiven you. They will tell the world how wonderful they are and they forgave you, and wasn't that nice of them. But of course, like all things that happen in narcissistic relationships, behind closed doors, it will be clear that they have not forgiven you. So despite their opaque and vague social media posts about forgiving people who have wronged them and proclaiming how forgiving that they are, and taking the self-righteous stance of how much goodness they're filled with, they will prance around the world as though they're some sort of holier than thou forgiver, but they actually didn't forgive you. And they do keep holding a grudge. And as a result, you kind of get dinged twice. And you not only have to acknowledge the hypocrisy of the world, viewing the narcissistic person as being so gracious as to forgive you, but the narcissistic person still takes it out on you behind closed doors because, number 4, they're going to bring it up again and again. You are not the only one who ruminates in this relationship. Narcissistic people pointedly will ruminate if they perceive that someone has done them wrong. It strangely confirms what narcissistic people believe about the world, that everyone is out to get them, that sort of eternal victim stance. But they can't believe that someone would do this to them because, after all, they are so special. And then again, that's that grandiosity and entitlement. Like, how could anyone do this to me? So they just can't get their head around someone breaking their trust, even though they are suspicious, and even though they claim to believe they are the target of whatever random witch hunt they're the target of. What this means for you is that whether they claim to forgive you or not, again, they're going to keep bringing it up for a long time. Like I said, maybe even forever. They're going to bring the thing up in eternity. And again, when you keep bringing it up, it's not really forgiveness. And on top of that, they won't let it go. No matter how many times you apologize, no matter how many times you should take responsibility, how many times you give context, and years go by and you never ever make the mistake again, it doesn't matter. They won't let it go. And hell, 25 years down the track, they may ask you, how could you have done that to me? Why did you do that? Help me understand why you did that. And will keep asking you, even when you answer their question fully and honestly and vulnerably. It's as though no answer can really get to what they want to hear. And then number 5, then there's the problem of vindictiveness. Listen, all of us have a little streak of vindictiveness in us. I have talked to many folks who hope someday that they will be able to get revenge on the narcissistic person, or that life will hand the narcissistic person a sort of karmic revenge mom. Over time, that sense of vindictiveness can fade, but vindictiveness actually tends to be very stuck and fresh for narcissistic people. And that can mean that if you did, or they perceive you did, something bad to them, seeking revenge is often a part of the narcissistic relationship dynamic. Now, getting revenge is not forgiving, and neither is vindictiveness. But whether or not they say they forgive you, it is not beyond the pale for most narcissistic people to believe in quid pro quo, tit for tat, evening the score. So they may lie in wait and get their revenge or do something hurtful and never apologize, but position it as, well, we're even now. You were owed this after what you did to them. And again, they'll say, now we're even, though oftentimes the thing they do is far worse. But the vindictiveness can mean that even again, they virtue signal and claim to forgive, that they don't. And then if you have done this bad thing to them, you do end up living in this incredible tension of like, oh my gosh, how are they going to pay me back? The narcissistic person's lack of forgiveness can also muddy the waters of your own forgiveness. You may try to take some high road stance. I'm going to tell you, I hate all this high road positioning. It just serves to shame survivors and leave them wondering if they are bad people, because I can promise you that the narcissistic people like to pretend that they are taking the high road, but I don't think they could even find the high road if they tried. Narcissistic people have a complicated relationship with forgiveness. They believe they deserve it. They like to put it out there to pretend to be morally superior, but they don't really know how to do it, because to truly forgive means that you no longer resent the offender. You no longer really punish the offender. You don't keep bringing the event up repeatedly. You don't weaponize the bad thing that was done, and you move forward in good faith. Well, a narcissistic person can't do that on a good day. And when you couple the narcissistic rage, the passive aggression, the victimhood, the hypocrisy and double standards, the entitlement, and the sense of superiority, including moral superiority, and the pathological selfishness, the short answer is no. I actually haven't witnessed much genuine forgiveness from a narcissistic person or had clients share with me any genuine experiences of forgiveness. I actually just read a bit in the news about one of the many narcissistic people gobbling up the oxygen in the news cycle these days, who had the audacity to say, "To err is human, to forgive divine," and yet this person's life is just a big revenge fantasy playing out in real life. Please. The narcissistic folks are great at throwing these aphorisms out, but they rarely can live them. So before you keep self-flagellating and wondering if you are a bad person for not feeling that you're able to quickly forgive a narcissistic person who has harmed you repeatedly, often doing the same bad thing, or you thinking that you can't heal because you don't forgive, remember, narcissistic relationships are all about a lack of reciprocity, and forgiveness is one more place that lack of reciprocity plays out. Ultimately, your forgiveness is a personal decision. Whether you do or you don't, please remember, if it doesn't feel right, you can heal just fine without it. Thanks again.